That the best part of your career, your life is still ahead of you. You know, I really honestly do feel that way.
Luther Vandross had one of the most beautiful voices in R&B music history. His smooth singing made him famous around the world with hits that people still love today. But behind all that sweet music, Luther was known for being very hard to please. He had very strong opinions about other singers and wasn't afraid to share them, even if it hurt people's feelings. While fans loved songs like Never Too Much and Here and Now, Luther was building a reputation in the music business as someone who could be quite critical of other artists. The same man who could make people cry with his beautiful singing was also known for saying harsh things when other performers didn't meet his very high standards. Many people in the music industry knew about Luther's strong opinions, even though the public didn't always hear about them. Luther worked as a background singer early in his career, singing for famous artists like Chaka Khan, Roberta Flack, David Bowie, and Carly Simon. This experience gave him strong ideas about how music should be made and performed. As he became more successful, these strong opinions sometimes created problems with other singers who were trying to make it in the same music world. The disagreements Luther had with other artists weren't just small arguments about how to sing a song. These were serious professional fights that sometimes lasted for many years. Some very famous Grammy-winning singers found themselves on Luther's bad side, and he wasn't shy about letting people know when he thought another artist was all style and no real talent. The rivalry with Teddy Pendergrass. One of Luther's biggest conflicts was with Teddy Pendergrass, another smooth R&B singer. Both men had powerful voices and were trying to win over the same fans in the early 1980s. Teddy was already well known for his romantic songs, especially Love TKO, but Luther was quickly becoming popular with his own style of sophisticated soul music. The music business loved to compare these two singers, and newspapers and magazines wrote about them as if they were in a competition. This constant comparison made both singers uncomfortable, but it especially bothered Luther. The situation got much worse at the 1983 Soul Train Music Awards. People who were backstage said that Luther told a reporter that Teddy's voice wasn't technically good enough, and that he relied too much on emotion instead of real singing skill. When Teddy heard about these comments, he fought back by saying that Luther was too polished and didn't have enough real-life experience to sing authentic R&B music. He claimed that real R&B fans wouldn't connect with Luther's style because it wasn't genuine enough. The fight between them got even worse when both singers were being considered for the same movie soundtrack deal. People in the music industry said that Luther actively worked against Teddy getting the job. Luther allegedly argued that Teddy's recent car accident had hurt his ability to sing properly. This comment really upset Teddy, and he never forgave Luther for bringing up his personal tragedy. After this, both singers refused to acknowledge each other in public. At music industry events, they would deliberately avoid being photographed together. Everyone could feel the tension when both of them were in the same room, and it made other people uncomfortable too. The conflict with Anita Baker. Another surprising rivalry was between Luther and Anita Baker. Both singers had similar sophisticated styles, which made their competition even more intense and personal. The problem started in 1986 when Anita's album Rapture was becoming popular at the same time as Luther's album Give Me the Reason. Both albums were aimed at the same adult listeners who liked smooth, classy music. People who worked in the music industry remembered feeling uncomfortable when both Luther's and Anita's teams were at the same events. A former record company executive said that Luther felt threatened by Anita's success because she was doing everything that he thought only he should be doing. Luther believed he had exclusive rights to classy musical arrangements, jazz influences, and crossover appeal that could reach both black and white audiences. Luther allegedly complained to his management team that Anita was copying his style and didn't deserve all the praise she was getting from music critics. The situation exploded during a 1987 recording session where both artists were supposed to sing together on a song for a charity album. Several people who witnessed what happened said that Luther walked out after hearing how Anita wanted to arrange the vocals. He supposedly said her approach was too dramatic and would make his part sound less important. Anita reportedly responded by calling Luther arrogant and impossible to work with. Their dislike for each other became well known in the music industry when neither would agree to perform at the same benefit concerts. People who organized musical events quickly learned that if they booked one of these singers, they couldn't have the other one. This created awkward situations that continued throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. The battle with Peabo Bryson. Luther's fight with Peabo Bryson shocked many people in the R&B world because these two singers seemed like they should have worked well together. Instead, they became involved in one of the nastiest rivalries in smooth soul music history. The trouble started when both singers were competing for the same high-profile duet opportunities in the mid-1980s. Peabo had already had huge hits singing with Roberta Flack and was becoming known as the best male voice for romantic, icky duets. Luther wanted that same reputation and felt like Peabo was blocking his path to becoming the king of duet singing. Everything came to a breaking point during a 1985 recording session for a major movie soundtrack. Both singers were invited to audition for a duet with Whitney Houston, who was becoming one of the biggest stars in music. According to the sound engineers who were there, Luther arrived early and heard Peabo's vocal recordings through the control room speakers. He allegedly got so angry that he stormed out of the studio, telling the producers that Peabo sang with no soul and was just a pretty voice with no real substance. When Peabo found out about these comments, he fought back during a radio interview. He claimed that Luther was jealous because Peabo could connect emotionally with female singers in a way that Luther couldn't. Peabo suggested that Luther's perfectionist attitude made him too difficult for women to work with, which explained why Luther rarely did successful duets with female artists. The final blow to their relationship came when Peabo got chosen to sing Beauty and the Beast with Celine Dion, a song that Luther desperately wanted to record. People in the music industry said that Luther never forgave Peabo for what he saw as stealing his dream collaboration opportunity. This duet went on to become hugely successful and won awards, which probably made Luther even more upset about losing it. The feud with Jeffrey Osborne. Luther's rivalry with Jeffrey Osborne divided the smooth R&B world and showed how competition between similar artists could turn ugly. Both singers were masters of romantic ballads, but their similar styles created a competition that became surprisingly vicious behind the scenes. The conflict started heating up in 1982 when Jeffrey left his band LTD to start a solo career. His first album featured the same sophisticated production style that Luther was becoming famous for, and radio stations started comparing their voices all the time. Luther reportedly hated these comparisons and felt that Jeffrey was copying his success formula. Things got personal during the 1984 American Music Awards rehearsals. According to backup singers who saw what happened, Luther approached Jeffrey backstage and allegedly said that Jeffrey's high notes sounded strained and unnatural. Jeffrey shot back that Luther was just angry because Jeffrey could hit notes that Luther never could. He called Luther a one-trick pony who relied on studio technology to make his voice sound better. The situation exploded when both artists were offered spots on the same summer tour. The concert promoters wanted them to take turns being the main act, but Luther refused to share equal billing with Jeffrey. He told his management team that Jeffrey didn't have enough hit songs to deserve the same status as a headliner, even though Jeffrey's songs like On the Wings of Love were very popular on the radio. Their feud became public knowledge when neither singer would appear on each other's television specials or award show tributes. People who had worked in the music industry for many years remembered having to carefully schedule recording sessions to make sure Luther and Jeffrey wouldn't be at the same studio at the same time. The bitter battle with Freddy Jackson. Luther's most bitter rivalry with someone from his own generation was his feud with Freddy Jackson. This fight was personal, professional, and absolutely brutal for both singers involved. The war began in 1985 when Freddy burst onto the music scene with Rock Me Tonight and immediately got compared to Luther by every music critic in America. Both singers had similar smooth vocal styles, but Freddy was younger, hungrier, and openly trying to take Luther's position as the king of romantic R&B. Luther felt disrespected when Freddy started calling himself the new Luther Vandross in interviews with magazines and newspapers. According to people who worked at Capitol Records, Luther was furious about this and demanded that his record label take legal action to stop Freddy from using Luther's name for promotion. When that didn't work, Luther got petty and personal in his attacks on Freddy. The breaking point came at the 1986 Soul Train Awards after-party. Multiple witnesses saw Luther approach Freddy's table and allegedly tell him face-to-face that he was nothing more than a cheap imitation who would never have real staying power in the music business. Freddy reportedly stood up and called Luther a has-been who was threatened by younger talent. Their mutual hatred became legendary in the music industry when Luther actively tried to block Freddy from getting certain performance opportunities. Record company executives remembered Luther threatening to pull out of television specials if Freddy was also booked to appear. Luther even convinced some radio programmers to limit how often they played Freddy's songs by suggesting that his voice was too similar to Luther's and would confuse listeners. The feud lasted for years, with both singers refusing to acknowledge each other publicly despite sometimes performing at the same venues. This created uncomfortable situations for everyone else in the music industry who had to work around their rivalry. The ultimate rivalry with Barry White. Taking the top spot in Luther's legendary feuds was his bitter rivalry with Barry White, who was known as the maestro of romantic R&B music. This wasn't just about music, it was about who truly owned the soul of romantic R&B and who had the right to be called the king of love songs. The conflict started in the late 1970s when Luther was still doing background vocals for other artists, and Barry White was dominating the love song market with his deep voice and orchestral arrangements. Luther allegedly told friends that Barry's deep voice was just a gimmick and that real singing required range and technique, not just a low register and heavy breathing. Things got worse when both artists were competing for the same audience in the early 1980s. Barry White had built his musical empire on bedroom ballads and romantic songs, but Luther's more sophisticated approach was stealing Barry's audience. According to former members of Barry's Love Unlimited Orchestra, Barry felt personally insulted that Luther was being called a better vocalist by music critics. The most explosive moment happened during a 1983 recording studio encounter in Los Angeles. Both singers ended up at the same recording facility on the same night by coincidence. Studio engineers reported hearing raised voices through the soundproof walls as Barry allegedly confronted Luther about disrespecting the foundation that older artists like Barry had built for R&B music. Luther supposedly fired back that Barry's era was over and that real musicians with actual talent were taking control of the music industry. Barry never forgave what he saw as Luther's arrogance toward veteran performers who had paved the way for younger singers. People in the music industry claimed that Barry actively campaigned against Luther getting certain awards and recognition. Barry believed that Luther showed no respect for R&B history and the older artists who had made it possible for someone like Luther to have a career. Their Cold War lasted until Barry White's death in 2003, with neither man ever publicly acknowledging their legendary behind-the-scenes battles. The legacy of Luther's rivalries. Luther Vandross was undeniably one of the most talented singers of his generation, but his perfectionist nature and strong opinions created enemies throughout his career. These feuds show that even singers with the smoothest, most beautiful voices can have sharp edges when it comes to protecting their artistic territory and professional reputation. Looking back at these rivalries, it's clear that Luther was both protecting his artistry and sometimes being unnecessarily difficult. His high standards and attention to detail made his music exceptional, but his inability to compromise or share the spotlight sometimes hurt his relationships with other talented artists. These conflicts reveal the competitive nature of the music industry, where artists with similar styles often find themselves fighting for the same audience, the same opportunities, and the same recognition. In Luther's case, his success and perfectionism made him a target for comparison, but his responses to that competition weren't always graceful or professional. The music world lost a true artist when Luther Vandross passed away in 2005, but these stories remind us that even the most talented performers are human beings with egos, insecurities, and the capacity for both great art and petty behavior. His legacy includes not only beautiful music that continues to touch people's hearts, but also cautionary tales about how professional rivalries can overshadow artistic achievement.